Hello, we're Luke and Matt. We're pastors at Village Church Chicago, and welcome to 10 Minutes That Make a Difference, where we take 10 minutes to talk about topics where life and faith intersect. And so today, we're going to be talking about what we're calling the myth of progress. And so the way, what that actually is, the best way, one of the ways that one of my favorite authors described this, C.S. Lewis, is he kind of had this term he called chronological snobbery, where we assume what is new, what is fresh, what's coming is always better than what is in the past. And I think that's just a good way of saying it. And I think when we start talking about this topic, there's two errors that we can make, two places we can go when we talk about, the world and its progress. We can either say the world is just getting worse, right?
Yeah.
Moral decay, society is worse than it's ever been, and it's just going to continue to get worse. Or we could say the world is better than it's ever been. We've got iPhones now, and we've got medicine and all these things. And I think to say that the world, to paint things in such a broad brushstroke, to say that one is either just as best it's ever been and it's going to get better, or it's as worse as it's ever been, it's only going to get worse, I think is to kind of miss some nuance there a little bit. But Matt, why don't you bring us into into why today, or in our current culture, I think there's kind of this sense that we are just getting better. I think that's the one we're tending towards in some of our culture. Why do you think that is? Why is it that we do buy into this myth that the future will be better than yesterday?
Yeah. Well, I think the first question we have to ask ourselves is progress even possible? And I would, when I look around, I would answer that in two ways, of both a yes and a no.
Right.
And so starting with the yeses, when we do look at things like technology, we do see that it has improved immensely. But does that, at the same time, does that always make our quality of life better? No. People wrestle still with loneliness through social media, and you find these whole new sets of problems. So you see things progressing, but then in some ways also regressing at the same time. So can we make just purely a positive move in the direction of progress? I don't know. Let me give a few more examples. So we also see education progressing. More and more people are able to come to the table of education and receive degrees. We see more and more people getting degrees, and so that's a positive. We see also justice improving in many ways. When our country was founded, only wealthy white landowning men were able to come to the table and vote and have a voice in politics. But now, obviously, everyone is allowed to come to the table. If you're 18 and you aren't a felon, you are allowed to vote in our country. And so, absolutely, that is progress. That would be bizarre if we said that wasn't progress.
No.
But then at the same time, we have to also look at those same challenges and see that there are challenges within it as well. So when we look at justice as well, from previous ways of setting up governments, from let's say a king who could at any point take your lands if he wanted him. Now we do have a democracy, but really what democracy is doing is we've invented different ways of pitting our selfishness against one another to kind of keep it in check, keep it in equilibrium, keep it in balance.
Kind of taking our bad and leveraging it to fight the other person's bad.
Exactly. So we found more inventive ways of doing that. And it's with our country, we have these three branches, and they're all set to not fully trust one another, not give anyone too much power, so that we can kind of live in this harmony within itself. And so when you say that, you can see that in some ways we have progressed, our systems have gotten better, but does that mean it's totally fixed the underlying problem? No. And I think the way I saw this most dramatically was when I was at the Holocaust Museum in Israel during a trip I had there a number of years ago. We often think of education as being the answer to the human problem, to our selfishness. If people just learn more, then they can empathize with another, care about them more. But when I was there, the thing that struck me as the most ironic thing I saw was that of the SS soldiers of the Nazis, the worst of the worst, it said that over half of them had college degrees.
Wow.
And that, around a third of them had doctoral degrees. And so these were probably the most educated country at the time, and yet people, since they had been going through so many hardships at the time, like that selfishness was harnessed in incredibly destructive ways.
That was less than 100 years ago.
Yeah. And so I think so much of our progress that we make, it's almost unraveling past selfishness that has become a structure of selfishness. Right. And so like, is that, real true progress? When
we created the problem.
Yeah, when we created the problem solved as well. And so I think sometimes we become a little self-congratulatory.
Right.
And yet, yes, like we can progress in some ways, and yet we're still wrestling with like all our progress is unraveling the past or the errors of the past at the same time that we're, when our new systems are created, there's still that same selfishness and problems within it. Yeah. So I guess, Luke, like, why do you think that there's is this underlying issue that we seem to not be able to progress forward past?
Right. Yeah, I think Matt, you really hit it on the head when you were talking about pitting our selfishness against each other. And I think what we're doing is we're kind of putting up fences and sort of boundaries around the real problem. And the problem, if you spend any time with people, is it's our heart, like selfishness, greed, distrust.
You hurt my feelings, now I'm gonna hurt yours.
Exactly. Hurt people. And it's so true. And I think the human condition hasn't changed since the garden, since Genesis, since creation. When Adam and Eve said that they wanted to be their own gods, to sort of say no to God and set themselves up. And when they sinned, they rebelled. All of these things, distrust, violence, greed, selfishness, entered into the world. And it says in Genesis that they then were ashamed and they covered themselves with fig leaves. And I think in sort of a metaphorical sense of that, these things like education and like technology and other things that we can kind of point to as progress are in some ways just modern fig leaves of trying to cover up, trying to deal with the problems of the human condition of sin. And so that hasn't changed, right? And I think the solution to this problem, to the human condition, hasn't changed either. It's still the gospel. It's still this needing to know God and to have God do heart surgery on us, because that's what God's about. God isn't about setting up these sort of fences around our sin and around our hearts. He's about coming in and doing radical heart surgery and changing.
Deal with the real problem.
Yeah, exactly. He wants to change who we are at a fundamental level and have that affect the world around us. And so I think, the way that that's done is through, first knowing God, right? Knowing Jesus, and experiencing that grace and forgiveness and spending time with him. A relationship with God changes people. And one of the best ways that even the tool for that in this life is in community with other believers, and the encouragement and the sharpening of one another just allows us to kind of chip away those parts of our heart that are sinful, that are broken, and we can kind of be restored in that. That's awesome. I think that's the hope. That's the progress that lies before us as Christians is knowing God and us being restored into whole people, so that we can love each other without all of this sin and muck in between it.
So it's wanting to change both outward and inward.
Right.
So that we can, once we have changed outward, we can be the people that can not make more new problems.
Yes, because all of our solutions just beget more problems that we need to solve.
Absolutely.
So,
Awesome. Well, we hope you found this valuable today. We hope you found it worthwhile. If you had any comments or questions, we'd love to hear your thoughts, whether that's leaving us a comment on Facebook, or whether that's subscribing to our podcast and leaving us a comment on iTunes. You can find it on iTunes or any other platform you have for downloading podcasts. And with that said, thanks for checking us out and being with us at 10 Minutes to Make a Difference. Next week, I've kind of as we were talking, thought of what our next week should be. Something that I think would be awesome to further discuss. And it's just this idea of how do we order the loves in our life? How do we order that? And the theologian Augustine had some pretty great things to say about that. And so I think that'd be just a natural way to look at like how do we progress, in our own lives? How do we have that internal progress ourselves? Before we can affect the positive outward progress in the world around us.
That sounds like an awesome topic. I'm excited.
Sweet.
See you next time.